Hi, this is Logan with Spiritual Danger Close podcast. Normally episodes and narrations of my blogs, which come from my thoughts on a particular subject and learning what it means to live spiritual danger close, requires having an open conversation with knowledgeable individuals. Today's episode reflects that idea and hopefully helps you with your spiritual discipline. Today's speaker was requested by me or those who follow the blog or podcast. If there is a conversation you would like to hear or wanted to comment on today's episode, please do so. If you're interested in coming on the podcast or wanted to comment on the episode, speak to me personally, you can message info@spiritualdangerclose.blog. Again, info@spiritualdangerclose.blog. Thank you and hope you enjoyed today's episode. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast, Spiritual Danger Close, are solely those of the guests, host, and contributors. They do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of any institution, organization, or affiliation, past, present, or future, associated with the host. Content provided in these episodes is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to serve as professional advice or guidance. Listeners are encouraged to seek appropriate professional advice and consult relevant sources before making decisions based off of information discussed in this podcast. The host reserves the right to grow, learn, and develop, such as ideas and beliefs and opinions shared in the past episodes may not necessarily be held in the future. The content of this episode is subject to change and evolution in accordance with the host's personal journey and understanding. Listeners are encouraged to engage critically with the content presented and to form their own opinions based on careful considerations and research. Thank you for tuning in to Spiritual Danger Close. Here is the latest episode. And welcome. It is the Amaral brothers.
Amaral.
Welcome. This is exciting. You are the first two individuals on this podcast, so it's pretty awesome to actually have some other people to banter with. It's super fun. So welcome, and let's get on into it. You guys just had some fun music released through Broken Curfew Records for your band, Every Thought Captive. Sorry, it's a little tiring for me right now, so I'll try to be at work.
Yeah, that's correct. You're on a roll, so we're good.
That is exciting. Every Thought Captive. That is really interesting. If you kind of tell us about yourself and kind of how you came about and get into it.
Yeah. You can go first, David. It's fine.
Oh, well, Daniel, I'll give like a brief synopsis, and Daniel will fill in the rest. And it's probably going to be very brief. So this project has actually been a brainchild of Daniel's for quite some time. He and I have actually been in a band, before that. But due to everybody moving in with their own personal lives, that kind of fell through. And Daniel and I had an idea, and mainly he had an idea. He came to me with some metal riffs or metal ideas, or just asking if we can compose some music. And then we did compose some parts. But unfortunately, I guess because he and I were like on different wavelengths at the time, we weren't able to progress further with that. So it's been on the shelf for, I would say, maybe at least 3.5 years before we actually released music. I think I did 2021 or 2022, our first EP, when we released it independently. And Daniel, like I said, Daniel can fill in the rest. But so that's kind of the genesis of Every Thought Captive. I think that was when the name also came in. Daniel, go ahead and you can fill in the rest.
Yeah. Funny enough, when I was in junior college still, that's where I remembered the verse in 2 Corinthians 10, where, we destroy every argument and every lofty opinion raised against knowledge of God, take every thought captive to obey Christ. So I always thought the name was cool. And I remember, again, I kind of, this is what I want the name to be. And that was in 2015. Didn't come up with anything up until then because of work and personal life and going to school and all that. So the name kind of just sat on the shelf for like 5-6 years. But yeah, that's pretty much the start of it. I think my brother and I was like, I just kind of want to release metal music finally. Like, I actually want to write music and just enjoy my time being creative that way. wanted to always have a band and do or have a project of some kind and do work with it. And so and the first EP was like the genesis of everything. Had to get the logo created, had to get the social media kind of stuff set up and all that. But yeah, and when we wrote the first EP, it was really like like kismet, I guess is the best way to put it. It just everything just kind of aligned. It wasn't too difficult to write it. We wrote that entire EP like in a week, and so within a week, yeah. I mean, it's 3 songs, but I mean, we wrote it within a week, and it was everything of it got finalized the summer after the summer. So we recorded it in December of 2021. But yeah, that's the genesis of the group, I guess, introduction wise, so to speak.
And for those who don't see it, I'll make sure I can add it in post. But your logo is actually kind of really cool, or not your band. I guess your band logo is the correct term. Sorry, a little long day. It's the T's are crosses, and it's really awesome how it just encompasses the logo and the band name. So I really like the play on that.
Yeah, it's the person who designed it. His name's Landon Armstrong. He's a Facebook friend of mine. He does digital art and illustration for tons of different things. So when Primus was on tour in the States, they had like every stop of their tour, they would have a new or a different digital artist do like one of their posters for their tour. And so Landon's done stuff for them. He's done stuff. I'm trying to think, for Primus. He's done stuff for a bunch of other bands. And so I reached out to him like, hey, can you make a logo? And he basically said, I have not done a metal band logo in years. So he's like, but I'll do one for you. Just because like I feel like I want to, give back into the Christian community for that, because he's a believer himself. And so he came up with that within the span of a couple of weeks. But I really liked it. It felt I just told him, make it look metal, but something legible that people can actually read. Because I can't tell you the amount of metal band logos that I see where I'm like, I don't know what the freaking heck this band is. And it's like, actually, I want people to know who we are. And so I think he did a really good job of making it abrasive looking and metal looking, but also legible. And it's funny because David and I have also talked about like that the logo sort of almost looks like a crown, which is interesting. Again, more imagery. I looked at it for a while and I remember Landon kind of told me that was probably a little bit of the concept behind it. So it's cool that it has the T's that obviously represent the cross. And then it also sort of looks like a crown. Again, another sort of Christian symbology. So yeah, I'm surprised that the logo turned out a lot better than I even thought it was going to be. So, but we're really, really happy with it. I don't think we're really going to change it probably ever because it's just so cool. And I can't imagine making something that's better than that.
It's very clean.
Yeah.
I went
a really, really huge professional for sure.
I went half and half. I did cursive script for a type, and then a shadow was a type and shadow. The shadow was just the typical like, and people were like, what's the rest of the band? And I'm like,
yeah.
So props to that. Make sure people can read it. That's really great. And I think I added all 3 songs to the Upon the Rock playlist. I'm not as active. It's not as massive yet because other people do it full time. I'm a very busy individual, but I do have a playlist of my favorite songs, and I really enjoyed being able to listen to everything that was on there. So it's really great. Really great track. Eternal, I think, is your biggest song right now. And then the other, Conscious and Punishment, really, again, and it just fits with your logo too, because you have 3 words and you have 3, there's a lot of symbology in it. Really enjoyed it. Now, the artwork's kind of trippy too. It's like a tree of life, maybe?
Yeah.
Explosion, spider webs.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like barbed wire, sort of. That was kind of the thing. I guess the story behind the artwork was from what so the guy who runs Broken Curfew Records is Seth. And so Seth is also a digital artist himself. And so he, funny enough, actually created the artwork. He had a dream, and that was kind of, he created it based off of his dream of what it means, of what eternal conscious punishment is. And so it's, you could look at it symbolically as the tree of life being cut off essentially from everybody else. But weirdly enough, the tree of life it looks dead. So it kind of conveys, again, there's very much symbology there. What was funny is I actually didn't necessarily like it when I first saw it, months before we, finished the EP. But then over time, the more I kept looking at it, the more I saw it, the more that I looked at it, I started realizing actually, Seth was right all along. Per usual, I usually way overthink and overcomplicate things. But yeah, that's the artwork is definitely trippy. I'm the kind of guy, again, when it comes to the band names and stuff, I don't like stuff that's super insanely cliche or you can't read it. And I also don't like artwork that's like, I shouldn't say I don't like it. I mean, like, I prefer artwork that is more symbolic and is not scary looking. Because I know metal bands, you just put a skull and crossbones and automatically it connotes death and destruction or decay. And so it was a nice way of it looking abrasive and dark without actually really having any dark symbology per se. Like, obviously barbed wire, I guess, could be perceived as dark, but like, other than that, it doesn't necessarily look dark or evil looking. And that was kind of what I was hoping that we would have, like, that anyone could wear the shirt and it wouldn't come off like offensive or abrasive in any sort of, especially in a Christian circle, like, what's evil looking about it besides a dead tree and barbed wire, really? And again, barbed wire is an interpretation, right? Some people don't see it like that. They see it like what you mentioned, like spider webs, and right. So we liked that because, again, a lot of that stuff kind of puts people off. And so I'm more so, I want more people to see, more people to kind of understand. The music will already put people off. So I don't need to do more of their job by having artwork or imagery that kind of gives off those connotations. But yeah, that's just basically the short, long and short of it, of the artwork story.
There's also a funny thing. I think Daniel and I also were in conversation about the artwork, like what we wanted the artwork to convey. And as far as for eternal conscious punishment, we had a conversation where we wanted the artwork to be, I think, and Daniel, you can quote me if I'm wrong, or correct me if I'm wrong, that we wanted the artwork to convey the, from like a first person perspective of someone that's in hell and in eternal conscious punishment, looking out from like a glass barrier that you cannot cross. You're in hell, and the glass barrier beyond that is actually the opposite of pain and torment and all that stuff. Something of that nature. I think we talked about that, but we were having trouble trying to we were trying to convey that to a graphic artist to try and match, but it's kind of, everything kind of gets lost in translation when you can't really properly convey that idea, because it just seems a little bit esoteric, if you will.
Yeah, it's like trying to have a blind person describe a color.
That's exactly what it was when we were trying to describe it to this artist. So
that's what was hard about doing the album artwork too. It was like, my original thought was, well, the idea of fire obviously makes sense given the subject and the content matter. But then I was like, well, in hell, you're being burned by a fire you can't see. So how as an artist, do you approach an invisible fire? So that was kind of, when I gave the concept to Seth originally, I was like, yeah, there's no way. I don't even blame him for not going down that avenue. But yeah, the EP was originally supposed to be a concept EP, and it was supposed to be from the perspective of somebody in hell. But even though they're in hell, they're still worshiping God, despite the fact that they're going through eternal conscious punishment. But I didn't want to step on any. I didn't want people to get the wrong impression that I'm thinking of hell in this is what I truly believe hell is actually like, and or ruffle anybody's feathers about what hell is or it isn't. So I kind of abandoned that. I just felt like it made more sense to kind of just each song have its own little identity.
I would say also, I mean, when those folks who are in hell, I mean, I would say they're glorifying God indirectly. They're not really worshiping him per se. They're actually, and they're still in their own sins, only thinking about themselves. How are they going to get themselves out? Like, how am I going to get myself out of this terrible situation? But at the same time, they're still in their own sinful, gratifying kind of mindset, if you will. And it's, yeah, and they continually hate God, and that's all they can do, you know.
This is a question that theology, especially within like Christian circles, argues all the time. I know, particularly within my faith, it's a huge question of, will Christ's atonement eventually forgive people? And there's a whole bunch of can of worms that you open up when it comes to that topic of hell, what was believable, what was not believable, and arguments and back and forth. People literally can make their entire academic careers based off of the way that they interpret something of that scripture. And when I was listening to it, I wasn't thinking of it like, obviously the title is eternal conscious punishment, right? So eternal God's conscious punishment. But to me, it felt more like how you feel in this life, if that makes sense, because in a way, for some people's lives, it can be almost like they're in the Garden of Eden. Everything is great and beautiful. And then you literally scroll the page on the internet and you are seeing somebody's entire life be just like that, right? So it's pretty tragic the way this world operates. And there's a lot of stuff. And I think that what I find appealing, and I agree with you, the choices of, and I'll commend Seth again. He's really great. He helped with my album artwork as well. He went above and beyond and gave me 6 options. And I'm a person who suffers from choice of decision. So it's like, I hate going to the store unless I know exactly what I want, because I'll be standing there, 45 minutes has passed, and I'm like, I have too many options. Just give me the thing and I'll leave. If there's a box, it's like something sweet, I'd go and buy that. Like, I don't even know what's in it. I'm just going to buy that and I'm going to go, I'd be happy. But, and a lot of what you've spoken about just kind of plays into like the interpretation of, obviously you explained to me what your intent was. And then I am feeling from what I was feeling from the song, where it was going, very different, or tracks rather. But, yeah, it's really great. And when it comes to Christians, there's like the classic group. It's like when the Beatles got famous and they're of the devil, that's devil music. And it's just so weird that, like, to me, I think like the Beatles are like Frank and Sinatra. Like they're just soft. Like, but if you wind back the time to the 60s, people were losing their minds over that.
They honestly did not know. Oh my gosh, it's kind of like when you're looking at it from the perspective of someone from the future, like say my brother and I, and then they're like, oh, the Beatles, that's devil's music, like, 1960s parent, and then here Daniel or I or both of us will be on the side and we'll be like, oh, that's cute. So it's just, yeah, they don't. But back then, no one thought, especially with back in 1966, I think John Lennon made of the controversial comment saying that, oh, we're more famous than Jesus now. And then you see all these people in the southeastern seaboard of the United States take all these Beatles CDs, or not CDs, these Beatles vinyl, these vinyl records, and just burning them, and just like literally do everything they can to, try and combat that. And it made this whole backlash. It was so strange, but yeah.
It's called marketing genius.
Yeah.
In a way. I think every generation has stuff like that, because then in the 90s when Pokemon was a big thing, you had a bunch of pastors and stuff say, oh, Pokemon's of the devil and here are the reasons why. And so it's it's just funny because like I feel like every decade has something like that, right? It was the psychedelic movement in the 60s. It was disco of the 70s. It was, there's always some specific thing every decade that the Christian community has to have some sort of reaction to and say, oh, this is evil. This is in the Southern Baptist circles, right? Like dirty dancing was a big thing, right? Or the idea that, oh, well, you're not supposed to dance ever because that could connotate, sexuality and all that kind of stuff. And so it's just interesting that, again, even with the Beatles, with a lot of different things, even today we have it still, right? Oh, you listen to metal, there's already this connotation of, oh, you listen to evil or hate music filled with hate, right? That kind of thing. And then you always hit them with the easy, obvious answer of like, well, how can you know it's evil if you can't even understand what the lyrics are? Because why do you listen to that screaming music that you can't even understand anything? But then how do you say it's evil if you can't understand the words? So I always thought that was funny. But yeah, every generation, or I should say decade, has a sort of thing that we all need to quote unquote revolt against. It's kind of odd. We live in a quote unquote postmodern world, and that's very postmodern way of thinking about how there's always supposed to be a victim and there's always supposed to be an oppressor. And so I feel like even the Christian community sometimes falls into that mindset where we are a victim and here is this oppressor, whether it's Pokemon or whether it's the 60s with, rock and roll. There's always supposed to be someone that's attacking us, and so we have to revolt. And again, the unbelieving world does that much more often. Very huge victim mentality that we have today. But the Christian community, I think, sometimes inadvertently gets itself involved in that kind of level of thinking too. So, but it's interesting nonetheless.
And especially in with the church and as a whole, especially Christendom and church as a whole, we get ourselves riled up into all these types of mindsets that we really don't have any business getting riled up with in the first place. And especially and it's not so much the fact, and it's more of a preference issue. And Daniel and I get, we've had, especially with another friend of ours from church, like, we've all listened to this type of music, and then we get into like post-hardcore and metalcore music as kind of like the gateway kind of genre of music, and then we go into like straight up death metal or black metal, and we explore all these types of these metal subgenres, and then this friend's mom was just like kind of like semi dogging my brother, her son, and me, like our personal preferences as far as music genres or tastes or something like that. It's still kind of weird, but I mean, at the same token, Daniel and I get that stuff, quite as well, but not as much in a as big of a degree as we used to. Thank heavens. But it's and especially with the whole debate of Christian rock, blessing versus blasphemy, and Daniel and I grew up with that mindset of it's a blessing because of using that type of genre of music to reach out to other people who may not listen to the word of God, in any other fashion, or what have you.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah. Unethical pro tip: if you are struggling to get your music heard, tag the Facebook group Christian Moms Against Death Metal.
We know one of them, and she has a son that listens to that stuff sometimes. So, very dear friend of ours too.
Now, this is a topic for its own episode, but like, there's the lady that's showing the monster can, and she's like, "Look, this is this is the Omega. There's 3 crosses, broken crosses, but you turn it upside down, and it's 666. This is the mark of the beast. You drink this, you're going to hell."
Right.
And that's been the way in every religion. And I find it funny, not to go on a tangent, but when the non-atheist or Gnostic, hedonistic, I think would be the best term, hedonistic side of societies, like, oh, we're so fearful of Christians. There's tyrannical Christians that want to take over the nation. It's like, babes, there's thousands of denominations. We tried to be united all at once, but we didn't like that. There's not going to be unified rule.
Yeah.
And it gets in that whole thing of like how the Southern Baptists were against Dirty Dancing, for instance, or and then you have like extreme spectrums where you have Christian denominations that say you literally can go out and sin. It's fine because Christ will accept you regardless. And then you have like the extreme side of if you don't lash yourself in the back, you've allowed Christ to bleed for you unnecessarily. And it's just like there's a wide spectrum of like, I don't know what the word is. It's escaping me, but yeah, the perception of like what is and isn't acceptable in Christianity is, well, arguably has been debated since the very beginning of Christianity. And if people have read the New Testament, they would have seen that even the people that Christ taught were immediately faltering as soon as he left. So it's just kind of very, very different.
We had a similar experience with a church we left before we moved to Texas, and the church we left started becoming a little bit more behaving within that mindset of like, oh, if you're not suffering, you're not really truly living for the Lord, are you? Kind of deal. It's like,
yeah, it's very pietistic. It's the whole Francis Chan, like if you're not being persecuted for your faith on a daily basis, you have to really realize if you actually are saved or not. Which is kind of sad because I actually really do like Francis Chan. I like his stuff on marriage is really good. It's just where he's kind of gone now. I've kind of really disliked being associated with Todd White and a bunch of other false teachers and stuff like that. And then also, again, like I said, that it's a very pietistic way of thinking because basically it forces you to have to reevaluate your faith literally every day. I understand doing that, test to see whether you're in the faith when it makes sense to, but to do it every day, it really messed me up spiritually for a while. It just makes you very depressed and very despair ridden. And you question whether you're saved like every single day. And it's just, you play this guessing game. I couldn't imagine being it almost kind of felt like being in an abusive relationship in the sense that, okay, is this person going to love me today or are they going to hit me? Right. Like, I don't know. And I can't tell. Like, so is this faith really real or is it not? And I'm putting up a facade. And so that was really tough. Yeah, that's in my opinion, that's kind of the long and short of it. But yeah, it was not the greatest thing, but I will say we did learn a lot about serving from that church. And so, I always try to take the good from the bad. So even though overall, it wasn't the greatest experience, I did learn what it meant to serve and why serving is important. Whether it's, serving the church or serving others or even serving, like taking care of yourself. But, other than that and a couple of other things, like I really, God put us there for a reason. And that was the reason. Everything else was sort of traumatic besides that. But, you take all the good that you can from even bad situations.
I have come to the point of you only go through something because at a certain point you're being tested. Obviously, I think I've been debating this idea of that there's this general Carl Jung was a friend and student of Sigmund Freud, and they had a little spitter spat and had a falling out. And Carl Jung had this idea of a collective consciousness before existence. And I've kind of been thinking about spiritual archetypes because Carl Jung introduced that there's a personality type and there's different types like explorers, adventurers, the wizard, the knowledge seeker, the joker, the bad side, or the shadow of who we are. But I think I've been looking at the scriptures and looking at these types of characters in these stories, I think there's a spiritual archetype of we are living through this experience, and we're also living through the experience of trying to overcome these sins that our ancestors all the way back to Adam have kind of been going through. And so I think there's a little bit of the stuff, like, for instance, somebody who has a very addictive personality, and you can go back and trace it to their entire family line. Maybe it's on you to break that chain so that your children don't have to go through that again, and kind of do that. So that's kind of heretical on my part, but it's something I've been thinking about. But at the same time, I also believe that we go through things because of what we've done, like the consequences of the sin. So I can do something and be forgiven of it, but it doesn't take away the consequence of my action, right? So drunk driving, I hit somebody, accidentally kill them, I get arrested, right? I can pray and ask for forgiveness for doing that crime and try to make restitution, but the consequence of me killing somebody through that involuntary manslaughter, I'm still going to do my time in prison. And so there's those things, but I also think we do go through things where, in this scenario, let's say I did go through that experience and I came across somebody going through the same thing, I could help walk and guide them through that situation. And it's like really hard to see that some people just don't get that yet. And it's like, it's not that God is testing you, it's he's preparing you to help those who will come through next. And it's frustrating because we're so focused on ourselves. We have like horse blinders to, God just standing right outside our purview. Just like, oh, come on, just please.
Yeah, it's what is it? We think a lot more in the micro way of understanding or seeing things around us. We don't really have God's way of seeing everything in the macro and how actual, how big it is. It's because you mentioned like having the horse blinders on. I think the world, not the unbelieving world. I mean, it's not even like that. It's like this, right?
It's a monocle.
Yeah, it's a monocle, right? Well, I mean, the Bible even calls it spiritual blindness, but
yeah,
they can't understand the concept of suffering. They can't understand the concept of, if some horrible, tragic thing happens, that no good can come from it ever, right? They just believe in pointless suffering. That suffering does not lead to anything. That's why a lot of them are hedonistic, and they try, and the whole life is about is pleasure and doing whatever you want and enjoying life and getting the most you can out of it, which I understand in some respect. Like, yes, obviously get the most you can out of your life, but at what cost? So it's, again, even Christians have a hard time of seeing things in the macro, and that's why we suffer, and that's why we question, right? We have Elijah who couldn't see it like that for a while and wanted to just ask God after, escaping Jezebel. He wanted to die. Same thing with, several other, especially Old Testament saints mainly, but like they just want to die. Please, God, just kill me. Right. Even with Moses, right? He didn't want to be the mouthpiece of God. Oh, God, just go pick someone else. Right. It's always seeing things in the micro. You don't realize, and you put it in a very nice way. It's like the reason why sometimes you do go through something, is it because it's a test, like a lot of people want to say. A lot of the times you're right. It's so that you can be relatable in this situation, so that when someone else comes along in your life that is experiencing the exact same thing that you already went through, that you can help hopefully guide them to where they don't make the same mistakes that you did, or at least they're aware of it, so that when they do get into those compromising situations, they have more of a chance of actually coming out of it, rather than you. So I think that's a really good way of thinking about it. Because like I said, the world can only really think in that micro way. Christians, we struggle with being in that, seeing things in the micro, but also realizing that God sees everything in the macro, and that anything that happens to us there's always a reason for that, even if it's a really terrible, horrible thing, right? Even like I said, even if a woman is raped, right, the baby can still be a huge blessing to that mother later on. But of course, the unbelieving world doesn't ever really see it like that. So again, it's very limiting. But I could use a bunch of other examples. But that's my point: is the world sees it as pointless suffering, and that nothing good can ever come from it. And the Christian, the believing worldview is the exact opposite, where it's like there is no such thing as pointless suffering, because even Christ was on the cross and he suffered, and it wasn't pointless. There was a specific reason as to why that occurred. So anytime we go through any trial or tribulation or of suffering, we know that that's not the end goal, and we know that that is not the extent of it. God's not just punishing me like a kid like a kid with a magnifying glass on an anthill, to use the Bruce Almighty analogy, right?
Mhm.
It's God puts you through these things, again, as you said, to allow us to relate to others, and so that we can guide them. We can be more of a mentor or even a spiritual advisor of some kind. But anyway, I could go on, but I'll stop myself right there. I have a tendency to ramble, so I'll cut myself off.
It's like being a light to others, and that's our reason for why we do the Lord's will, especially as Christians, and especially for Daniel and I being, the two halves of every thought captive. Why we do what we do for our group. So
Yeah, you bring up a good point, Daniel. I've said this before on the podcast, but I'll mention both of these stories because I also feel it's important to remember. Sometimes we are in the refiner's fire, and we may be going through something that we are not fans of, but we need to go through it. And sometimes we're in a situation where that's the only way that God can talk to us and remind us of things. I was in a very hard graduate course. I knew I wanted to start it off with research and statistical analysis because it sounded mathy, and I was right. There's a lot of programs, but you still have to validate it through just to make sure, right? Because you could put something in wrong, and if you don't know what you're looking at, you get it wrong. And it was just very stressful. And I'm having to type this very long paper. And I got into the habit of using Microsoft OneDrive that if there's internet, it should just automatically save and I don't have to think about it. Like it's not like a video game in the 90s where I have to go and hit save all the time. It just does it for me. And I got used to that and I wasn't paying attention and bam, I had spent 7 hours all the way, basically my entire Saturday working on this. And I go to upload the document, and the last 3 pages that I needed to finish for my paper were gone. And I said some things that I repented for. I decided I needed to take a break, and I went to this my base's gym, and I was running and exercising and just kind of letting it out. And YouTube randomly pulled up a person who taught statistics, and it happened to be exactly on what I was submitting for. And I had realized I had missed a whole thing. And knowing how the professor graded, I would have failed that assignment. And I went and submitted. I can't remember the grade now, but it was passing, and I got through that class with a 90 something. And at first I was so angry at God, like, why would you allow this happen? I've basically wasted. I'm going to have to come back and do all this stuff. And I did that. And I went through that experience, and it was for my benefit. But in the time, it was not for my benefit. Logan did not see a benefit in that. Logan was not a fan. Like Jonah being swallowed by the whale. Sometimes you have to be swallowed by the whale in some things. And sometimes we're told and we have to do things that doesn't make sense, but that's, I think, being comfortable with doing things that doesn't make sense. Like a gentleman felt very prompted to take a screwdriver to church and thought that was a stupid, why would the Spirit tell me that, right? And he got in the car and he didn't feel right. So he went inside, he grabbed the screwdriver, put it in his coat, and was like, all right, we'll go to church. I have the screwdriver. Halfway through service, they hear a curdling scream of a child who got the hand stuck in there. And how did he get the hand out? And why did the child have their hand saved? Because he randomly had a screwdriver. That gentleman was talking about, and he could say, the Lord could tell me to strip naked and I would do it right now. So kind of extreme example of learning to see how things are and being open to those things. So just because you go through something doesn't mean you're bad or you're doing something or you've made a mistake. That's just life. It's just life. That's great. I like it. So we've talked about your every thought captive, your 2 brothers. let's kind of wind the clock back. I kind of feel like I didn't go into this earlier. How did you get into music?
Mainly, it was through. I would say it's mainly through our dad. Our dad's a fairly musical man himself, and funny thing, he's actually featured on the song Conscious off of our EP Eternal Conscious Punishment. He played trumpet and flugelhorn, and it was such a joy to have him featured. And Daniel and I wanted to have him featured on a song, somewhat of one of our tracks, and we were happy to have him featured. But he was like he's just such an immense blessing. And I know that there are probably a lot of other musicians, especially within the main music industry space, will probably say that, but it's also true. It's also true for us, because maybe it's on a minor scale, but our dad was he was very much into like the 90s alternative rock and grunge, and he kind of he definitely got us into a lot of the Christian rock artists like Cutlass and Falling Up, Thousand Foot Crutch. Like, he especially likes the new metal stuff, especially like the old Thousand Foot Crutch stuff. And so he like back when TFK sounded a little bit like Rage Against the Machine, something like that. And my dad he's all about that stuff. He's I mean, he did not listen to Led Zeppelin for a while, only because the members did drugs, and he wanted to do his best to keep Daniel and I away from that, which is a great thing, not a problem. But couldn't deny the fact of Led Zeppelin's musicianship, and that's definitely one of my influences as well, especially as well as Daniel's. Because John Paul Jones is an influence of mine on bass. John Bonham's an influence on Daniel on drums. But it's kind of funny, like, look at these musicians as well, and how they've also influenced other artists, especially like, bands like Creed. And I know Creed gets a lot of flack. I listen to them quite a bit, and it's like their musicianship is also top notch. There's no denying that. And then we got into like a lot of those rock artists, and then got into metal, and that's kind of like it's the gateway to post-hardcore metalcore. And then it got into a little bit more on the metal side. That's kind of how I think Daniel and I got into music in a way. But Daniel, go ahead and what was your take on as well?
Yeah, when I remember when we were growing up, my parents had the CDs of that's what I call, or no, it was Have a Nice Decade.
Yeah.
So I grew up with disco. Literally, my parents were living still in the 70s, even in the 90s. And so we grew up with Kool and the Gang, and the Gap Band, and AC and the Sunshine Band, and a bunch of that kind of stuff. And I hated it when I was growing up. So I really hated music honestly, until like I was 12, and we were on we were still living in California at the time. We were visiting family in Arizona. And I remember having my dad's old classic iPod, the very first one. He still has it. It still works. The one that if you sold it right now on eBay, you would get $1,000 out of it, because they're so rare. I remember playing Led Zeppelin because I was bored. I think my Game Boy had died. And so I just took my dad's iPod after he gave it to me. I'm like, can I listen to something? And I found Led Zeppelin. I remember he mentioned them several times. And then I probably religiously listened to Led Zeppelin for like a year and a half, and only them. That's literally what drove me to drums. They're still one of my all-time favorite bands, just because of the influence and understanding just rock music in general. And that Led Zeppelin is probably one of the best bands to have, because they're so varied. Right, folk rock. There's even some reggae and some funk, and all that kind of stuff. They're very and heavy metal. They're very, very varied band. So that's how I got started into music, into drums and rock. And then school, we did drumline, and we did the all that sort of stuff. And then I think our friend Brennan, he actually told me about As I Lay Dying. I had never heard metal really. And I was like, the first thing I remember, I think it was 94 Hours, the very, one of the first major songs from As I Lay Dying. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't know what he's screaming about, but I really love the drums. So that's what drove me to it. I never really I remember hearing the screaming, thinking to myself, like, I don't understand it, but I don't hate it. I just like the way the drums are and how fast they are. And so that's my introduction to metal was through metalcore and through As I Lay Dying. And ironically enough, As I Lay Dying has had a lot of controversy within the last decade for sure. But even God can use faulty people to still instill good things in others. So that's how that's how I got started into understanding like metal and stuff. And metalcore obviously was a good genre to get into because it was a good encompassing genre of a couple of different subgenres. And that was when it was popular, right after nu metal kind of died out in the very early late 90s, very early 2000s. Like 2005 was when metalcore was like probably at its peak. But that's what got me into metal in general and thusly into music. I could talk about my musical journey much further, but like that's the genesis of like how I got into music, and then how I got into actual metal music in general. It was obviously the gateway genre for me was metalcore.
It's funny, Daniel mentioned Brennan. That was the same friend of ours that I mentioned in the beginning of this podcast. And it's funny because Brennan also, before, I think maybe it may have been slightly before or around the same time that he showed Daniel the 94 hours video from As I Lay Dying that Brennan gave me. I think it was a CD of his, and I actually still have it. It was an Under Oath CD of theirs called Define the Great Line. And Brennan gave it to me one day, and he was just like, "Here, listen to this. It'll change your life." And I'm like, once I put that CD in my CD-ROM player, I listened to like a first few seconds of their first track In Regards to Myself, and then immediately my ears get assaulted by a wall of sound. It was just like so very heavily compressed kind of drums, guitars, bass, everything, and then especially with all the unclean screams. And I was just like, dude, my ears just got like a mental beating, man. But I mean, it actually was kind of cool because I didn't hate it, to be honest. Because when I mentioned Creed, they play in more so drop D style tunings, and so did Under Oath. So it was easy for me to understand how Under Oath played some of their music. I was just like, oh, it sounds okay. They're in the same tuning, okay, in the same key. But it was just kind of funny because still have that CD, Brennan's, and actually it's now signed by all the band members. And and Under Oath is also another one of my influences. And it was funny because on the first EP that Daniel and I did, As Every Thought Captive, two of the songs that I helped compose were very much heavily influenced by a couple other Under Oath songs prior to their apostasy or their apostasy state kind of deal. But I mean, even before all that happened, I mean, I'm still a fan of their older stuff. I don't really get into their newer stuff because of that. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. And Brennan's a really dear friend of Daniel and I, and has been for almost probably actually 30 years.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. And Daniel and I have actually been in a band together. We were in a band almost like 12, 13 years ago. Goodness gracious, has it really been that long? 13, 14 years ago, I think. I don't know. Maybe no, 12 years ago. I don't know. I'm losing track.
Favorite Led Zeppelin song?
No Quarter is a good one. And it was funny because when I heard it, I'm just like, this sounds a lot. This kind of sounds grungy. And it's funny because grunge wasn't even a thing when Led Zeppelin made that song, because it's very bluesy, but it sounded like it was like a grunge or a post grunge kind of vibe. It gave off that type of vibe, but it was just something that they ended up doing nobody even called it grunge back then, like I said, because it wasn't even a thing. But it really was grunge before grunge even came to be. I mean, that's one of my favorites. But I know Kashmir was the first song that I listened to because of all the cellos, and I used to play violin and cello, before I got into bass and guitar. And so that was kind of my foray, if you will, into rock music. But other than that, what else there is? The Lemon Song is also a good one because of the bass runs. But yeah, there's a lot of them. Dan, what are your favorites?
Yeah, I can't say I have one definitive favorite, but I will say I do like obviously Stairway to Heaven. That's the most cliched answer I'll give. Kashmir is really good. I really like Achilles' Last Stand. I honestly think that is one of their most underrated songs from their catalog, for sure. That's easily the best song on Presence, for sure. I like In My Time of Dying. Houses of the Holy is a good song. Trampled Underfoot is also a really underrated good song. And then obviously like Communication Breakdown, Dazed and Confused. There's so many. And a lot of them are very different. Right, Durmaker and Fool in the Rain. All of those songs are very different and have very different vibes. So it just depends on the day for me. But I will say one song I definitively do not like is Immigrant Song because of how unbelievably overplayed that song is. I really think that's one of their worst songs. It's not a horrible song. It's just, my God, they overplay the heck out of that song. And it's like, you do realize that Led Zeppelin has at least 10 songs that are 1,000 times better than this one. But the reason this one gets picked is because it's short and it's very iconically, it has an iconic part in it, I guess. But yeah, that's the one song I will say I am not a fan of personally.
And when you said they, you meant like, a lot of the media folks, a lot of the filmmaker folks.
It's just annoying to me because they always pick that song as if, and it makes me feel like that's the only song that they have to contribute to the whole musical world was Immigrant Song. I don't know. That's how I feel about it. I could go on, but
yeah, that makes sense. I get it.
You said Kashmir, and then you said you played violin. I played violin for probably about maybe a year and a half, and then stopped because of a situation where one school had orchestra, one school didn't, whatever. But I'm going to ask on the violin subreddit if people, hey, does anybody else like the song Kashmir? Because I feel like there's a trend, and I'm curious now, so I'll have to go ask. But yeah, it's great songs. Have you guys played the No riff in Guitar Center?
Which No riff is it?
The Stairway to Heaven.
No, not personally, because I mean, I had other riffs that I wanted to play and wanted to check out, and most of them are very rhythmic, but they're not like, they were never really cliched riffs. I mean, if I wanted to play some Linkin Park-esque kind of stuff, I would do that, but I wouldn't get called out for it being like, oh, you cannot do that. Only reason is because it's more of a rhythm guitar kind of part. People don't really associate like a lead part with it. There's no melody behind it. It is what it is. And for me, especially as a guitarist and an audio engineer, I am very, very picky about my distortion tones. So if I'm wanting to search for an amp, and especially a guitar, and I'm a Fender guy through and through. I play Fender basses, guitars. I love their stuff mainly because of the nostalgic kind of deal. And it's weird because, I mean, I'm not to say this is an implicit endorsement of Fender or whatever, but a lot of stuff that they have done as a company, they actually pushed, and it was like, it kind of has like a 50s vibe to it or whatever. And but then again, their guitars and basses have lasted the test of time. But it's funny because that was one of the first bass guitars I have, and I still have, but it's a Squier, not a Fender, but still Squier 2001 Affinity Series precision bass, and it was in the color blue because blue is my favorite color. and I still have used it a lot. And I think the main, am I going trying to go with this? And I'm terribly sorry if I'm going off tangent myself. So hey, it happens, right? But but I think in this case for me, like I started using a lot of this stuff, and especially in metal music, I was like, oh, metal music, it doesn't have to necessarily be all these other brands, like, you know, like Ibanez, although I do have Ibanez or whatever. But I can also use, you know, stuff that has been used during the 50s to actually make music with, and a lot of bands still use stuff like that, and I just try to use that. Again, I apologize, and there's probably some tangent I was supposed to go on, and maybe I fell off the deep end or whatever. But
Oh, I could talk audio. I'm a deep diver.
Yeah.
And then I get habitual. So I went on like a Jurassic Park binge, and that lasted like 7 months, where every day I was watching something about Jurassic Park or this and that, fan theories, and I repeat cycle through different stuff. Right now it's Naruto for other reasons, but yeah, audio engineering, there's so many different unique aspects in recording. And I was able to go to the Muscle Shoals recording studio in Alabama.
Oh, wow.
And to see it and to smell how terrible it is in there.
I've lived in Alabama, but haven't been up that region though. So
and it's still used today, and it's a interesting studio. So many famous artists went through there, and the impact it has. So while the digital analog age does enable like you to basically record an album in your apartments without being in person, it's very different. In the box mixing, there's a whole argument you can go down of analog versus not. And at the end of the day, I think most people don't listen to it. They feel a song. And so they don't really care. And audio engineers can nitpick you. It's like the idea you spend 4 hours mixing and you finally get rid of that nasty frequency and you jump back to the whole mix and then it stands out more. And you're like, what did I do? And so it's just interesting on how you can tackle it. And there's just so many different opinions. But at the end of the day, it comes down to like what sounds good. People don't care.
And it's funny. That's true. It's funny. I was about to mention why I chose and I'm actually glad you got into the audio engineer part because I was trying to follow that tangent when I was saying that I'm picky with my distortion tones on guitar, and I try to get a guitar, especially with a guitar like a Fender Strat or a Tele that has, string gauges that are like 9 to 42, and I'm tuning it down to drop C, and then and then Brennan even especially was one of the guys that told me, like, David, you have pretty thin strings, a 9 to 42 on a Stratocaster or a Tele. Why are you using thinner strings for drop C tuning when you need to have thicker strings? I'm like, well, I didn't know why, but at the time I was like, well, because it felt good to me. That's what I thought. But then coming from an audio perspective, it makes a little bit more sense because and if I'm using distortion on those with those strings, with that guitar and amp with those strings are actually still, they're small, but they're meant to have the guitar sit at a higher frequency without me having to do a little bit of additional tweaking to get a little bit of the bass frequencies out of the mix, So it is like a pre-mixing kind of, it became like a pre-mixing kind of mindset before I even get into mixing, because I'm still in the tracking phase. And with bass, I didn't have to worry about that at all. Yes, I still have, 45 to 100 gauge bass strings, on a 4-string bass and drop C, sue me, right? But like, it still made sense. And I'm just like, I didn't have to worry, because even though the strings might be quote unquote floppy for other musicians out there, I have a different mindset when it comes to tracking with those strings. And if I have to if I have to play in drop A tuning, then I'm going to get a 7-string electric guitar, some 5-string bass, symmetry, right? So that's kind of those are reasons why I use those types of tools. But That's what I was trying to do, minus the Fender part. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was listening to a mix course, and he was recording one of his first live bands, and this drummer came in, and the cymbal was cracked. And he's like, "I'm not recording you guys. You need to go down to the store, get his Guitar Center, and get a new cymbal and come back." And he was like, "No, man, it'll be fine." He was like, "Cool. But yeah, I'm not recording you unless you get that, because I'm not wasting my time and I'm not wasting your time. You can go get that symbol and fix it." So some people get real picky on that and making sure you have good quality and sound coming before and your environments and stuff. So it's real interesting where technology is coming from, or the drop. Whoever discovered drop tuning they were like, oh.
A lot of people have discovered that type of tuning. I don't know if you could trace it. So much so that I don't know if you could trace it back to any one particular individual. It could have been Robert Johnson, the Delta blues guitar from Mississippi, for all I know. I have no idea.
Oh, it's like you mentioned that. Oh, what's that song? Bamba Bambo Baby. Am I saying that right? It's just like musicians just continue to steal from each other. And it was like, oh, this white band sung the song. And I always thought it was this white band. And then it turned out it was a black guy. And it turned out the black guy was covering another black guy. And it went all the way back to like the 1800s. And you're like, this is wild.
And it's it is because a lot of the, a lot of the influence from rock and roll came from big band, from jazz, and blues. A lot of that was the blues. All of that was
Black Betty.
Yeah, exactly.
That was a song. Sorry, I think
Black Betty. And a lot of those genres were very heavily influenced by Afro music. African music in the States. The only reason why it became so popular was because you had folks like Elvis and Johnny Cash popularize a little bit more of those genres into the mainstream, because back then you couldn't have an African American artist, portray that, because obviously it was just so controversial at the time. As right now at the moment, not really as much, because you have a little bit more freedom of expression here in this time period, where you have multiple ideas and all that stuff. So,
kind of controversial. Turns out it was a African American work song sung by Huddy Lead Belly Ledbetter. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like Elvis Presley is known for having covered basically the same things, and it's just interesting. But music is like that. But my wife's Brazilian, and I got into Brazilian. I love lo-fi. I used to be really into EDM. I downloaded Tractor, and I would do it on my phone and stuff. And then I just realized this is market saturation. I'm not really contributing to it much, and to do the setup I wanted, I didn't have time for it. So, but I appreciate like EDM music, and then that got me into lo-fi somehow. I don't know how that happened. And so there's like different types of lo-fi, and like Brazilian lo-fi is something I was vibing with even before I was meeting my wife, and Africa, like there's a lot of African influence in Brazilian Afro beats inside of Brazilian music. But then there's also like indigenous sounds and their own indigenous cultural music. So it's just like this hodgepodge of music, and it just works. And fun fact, Frank Sinatra is a massive star in Brazil, and it's still prevalent in a lot of these bands and stuff. It's very cool. Eating at a steak restaurant, there's a live band right there, and it's just really, really cool to see how prevalent music is in certain countries like that.
Yeah, and how influential a lot of artists like Frank Sinatra, how they transcended their own livelihood into other circles. And it's funny with Frank Sinatra, like Frank Sinatra even influenced Jim Morrison of the Doors, of all people. only because there was a certain microphone that the engineer that the Doors were working with, a certain vocal mic that that this engineer had, and the engineer told Jim Morrison, like, "Hey, this is the mic you're going to be singing into." God bless you. And so this is the mic you're going to be singing into, and then Jim's like, "That's great," and then the engineer replies, "Well, why is that? Why is that great?" And then Jim replies, "Because this is the same microphone that Frank Sinatra sings into." And it just shows you how much Frank was respected in even outside his innermost circle. And one of the gentlemen whom was in his innermost circle is a trumpet player by the name of Jim Lenahan. And Jim nowadays is operating his recording studio, I believe, somewhere in Claremont, California, where I had a master's degree project that I went ahead and recorded in his studio. And because the studio had a lot more options than mine does, and very much so rivals my graduate school's recording studio, because like it's in an unassuming location, but it's so interesting. And Jim was just so helpful in my pursuits. When I had like a mix ready or whatever, he listened to it and he's like, "Ah, it sounds great." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Do I need to do any other tweaks? Like maybe just do this or whatever." And most of the time, Jim has this, I guess Jim has this saying like, "Don't let the artist know that you pitch corrected them or whatever." You know, the singer or whatever. Is funny. I know I'm hijacking the conversation at the point. You know.
No, it's the whole point. I'm boring.
Salient point salient point in this segment is Frank Sinatra was a very influential individual, and nothing. Yeah,
and I would bet money if he was still alive. Is he alive? I don't even know.
No, he passed away in '98. I believe.
Yeah. There's some people where you're like, I thought he was dead.
Okay.
Yeah. It happens. You're like, I thought that person was dead a while. Like, I'm confused. Post Malone would 100% do a song with Frank Sinatra. Like I mean, obviously did it with Ozzy, but it's just like, there's so many people that were affected by him. That's like that tree of like just how every genre. It's interesting. We talk about all these different genres, and we've mentioned it before about how, like, you know, somebody started this and this and this and hopping around in different musical tastes. It's just, I think it kind of influences us and how we go about looking at music and stuff that we like. And it's funny, you talk about early 2000s, people say that was the peak of metalcore, but there's like some people that say, no, that was the golden era of metalcore, and we're now in like the bronze era, or like that's the bronze era and gold era. It's just like all these different ways that people look at it. And the other day, it's like you look at Spotify and it's like new core, and you're like, what is new core? It's like people just keep coming up with stuff, or like Lorna Shore, for example, in deathcore is not considered deathcore. It's considered black and deathcore because it's more black and metal than it is deathcore. And it's just like, I don't know. Is it? I'll let fans argue.
Yeah, especially Lorna Shore. I just wish they would ditch the breakdowns. I would probably like them a lot if they did that, and the fact that they don't bothers me because it really, in my opinion, sullies their sound. There was a band, I think they're still around, I don't know, called Make Them Suffer, and I wasn't a huge fan of them either, but I did like literally every aspect about that band except the deathcore parts. So I'm just like, you guys could easily just ditch this part and be a really, really cool melodic like black metal band or Black and Death or whatever. But I don't know. It's funny how certain again, like Lorna Shore is probably the biggest deathcore band out right now. And I get it because they're all really talented and stuff like that. But I'm just the kind of, I feel like sometimes my elitism gets in the way. And so if I even hear the word core, I just immediately am like, I'm not interested because I know it's going to have the halftime feel and the breakdowns. And I've heard that for the last 20 years of my life. I don't need to hear that anymore. So you branch out. Like even for a long time, I didn't listen to I got tired of black metal. I got tired of death metal. And so I went into like the avant-garde route. And so I found bands like Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum and um, Free Salamander Exhibit and a bunch of really odd things that they're kind of metal, they're kind of rock, but they kind of find they're definitely like their own genre, I guess. It's just they're so odd. And there was a bunch of other avant-garde metal bands that I can't remember off the top of my head, like Carnival and Coal and like Arcturus and there's plenty of them that I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but they kind of help me see metal in a different way. And so like right now I'm sort of on a mix between prog metal, death metal, black metal, and then avant-garde. So I've kind of been floating in that realm for all the way up until like maybe 10 years ago, up until now. And so it's still kind of going there because I love Obscura and I love a bunch of other prog death metal bands and stuff like that. Archspire is probably one of my favorite bands as of like the last few years. I saw them in concert and they were fantastic. But when I first heard them, I didn't like them, but now I really like that band a lot. So it just, it changes, and it's interesting that, because tech death wasn't really a big thing up until like 20 years ago. And now seeing how prevalent it is, it's just odd to see. So I'm kind of curious, like, what's going to come next, right? And then Meshuggah was also probably one of my biggest influences. And again, I hated Meshuggah when I first heard them. Thought it was the most monotonous, overly repetitive things I've ever heard. But then when you actually understand what they're doing, it's like, oh, that is insane and otherworldly. I don't know how you guys are doing this. I mean, they literally created gent and basically that whole entire subgenre of music. And, then you have Textures and Tesseract and Fell Silent and a bunch of other Seek and a bunch of other bands that are like Periphery even. They're just copying what Meshuggah did like 25 years ago. So it's just funny to see little things like that. And then you have the other rabbit holes I won't go down, but Fear Factory is always like, oh, well, we were doing that stuff way before. And you can get into that argument, but it's interesting to see, like, again, how music evolves and how you can kind of trace its origins and see other things. But yeah.
Especially with genres like melodic death metal. And my brother actually showed me this band called Disarmonia Mundi from the Piedmont region out in Vigliana, Italy. And I listened to their stuff and I'm like, this is actually really good. And I made the connection between them and another Italian metalcore band called Doomsday, which I still firmly hold to the belief system, the belief in that I think the only band that has actually done metalcore, like the style, the musical genre metalcore, any justice whatsoever is Doomsday. Mainly because of how they had breakdowns, but they had a lot of melodic moments with the guitar lines. And it's just like, they did a lot of stuff that was just like, yeah, it was a lot more out of the box than like a lot of the generic Cookie Monster, breakdowns and stuff like that. And I got to a point where I compared melodic death metal and metalcore together, and I made the comment on a Facebook thread somewhere, and the comment was this: that metalcore is essentially melodic death metal with breakdowns. And I actually had somebody take exception to that, and then he just responded with like a throw up emoji. I'm just like, hey, just listen to this. Listen to this, to Doomsday's "Lay Down and Burn" EP. Prove me wrong. So like don't just give me a throw up emoji and just disregard my comment. And then that's all he did, because he just didn't like my comment. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, it is what it is.
Someone is typing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I just find it so hilarious that people have that kind of reactionary comment and they don't even have a rebuttal, or as much of a rebuttal on anything in that regard. It's just like, okay, I mean, hey, you're lost, bro.
I think everyone does the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like trying to be unique and just do what you want to do. For my aspect, I've kind of been toying with like doing a song from each kind of genre.
Yeah.
Just because I think metal's so cool. I don't know if it's out, and I'm good thing I read the chat Discord again. I forgot he told me to be quiet about who he is. but it's like it's a ghost art. He's ghost artist. So it's kind of anonymous, but
Okay.
I lended myself to his project for dungeon synth black metal.
Oh yeah.
And it was the coolest thing. I realized I hadn't heard anything about it, and so I needed to follow up with him. Like, hey man, where's that song at? Because it was actually really cool. It was about a bunch of guys going through the woods and like having barely survived like a onslaught, and they're just like reminiscing, and it was just super cool with like this like 16 dungeon synth's awesome. So
You might need to send me that song, that whatever song that is that you're referencing. Mainly because I'm working with an artist right now, and he and I are probably going to end up doing composing a dungeon synth black metal song at some point, because I'm producing his record. It's already almost finished, and it's in the finishing stages, mixing and mastering, but it will be mastered at some point. So it's going to be mastered very soon. So. But,
it was a slow song. I think my big influence for me was John the Butcher. I guess he calls himself Hate Church. He was for the last 10 Seconds of Life. That was the deathcore band I got really into. I saw him live, so I think I have a lot of preference towards him. There's other deathcore bands, but like In the Midst of Lion is very influential. But my vocal styles, just because I've listened to so much of the Violent Sound album, I think a lot of my stuff is there. But a lot of his songs are around like 130 beats per minute. There are some like 200 beats per minute with like just the blast beats going insane, and the drummer with 20-inch calves just going crazy. But doing the dungeon synth was just so weird because it was I think the song was like 111 beats per minute, and it was just like, okay. Metronome is on. I forgot to ask, who does the vocals?
Daniel.
Nice. We got all.
Thank you.
I just realized we talked about who does the instruments. We got bass guitar and we got drums. Wait a minute. There's vocals in this group. It's not an instrumental group only. That's awesome.
No, thank you.
How'd you get into that? The streaming side, because that's it's a journey.
It's just like one of my friends, like when we were growing up, we kind of like did it. We kind of grew into it at the same time, like, on the like early 2010s, where you would go on YouTube and type in how to do whatever. And so we would see videos of like how to do screams and stuff like that. And so I think it just over time I got interested in it. And then I just practiced like when I was driving, going to work, or going to school and stuff like that. And so it just kind of evolved that way. And then it evolved just through the different musics that I was listening to. So I felt like for the longest time, I was really only good at the death grunt kind of stuff. But I kind of wanted to develop the highs. And so now I have them I feel like my highs are much better than my lows are. I feel like my lows are really airy. But it was just like who I was trying to sound like. So when it comes to the lows, I really do try to make them. I try to enunciate as well as I can. I'm sure it'll get better and better over time. So the band November's Doom, I try to sound like that guy when it comes to the lows, because that guy has probably the best death growl that is the most. It's like the cleanest and heaviest and most enunciative I've heard of any death growl from like any other person who does that style. And then when it comes to the highs, I really like Peter Spiebel from Extol, and then Pilgrim from Crimson Moonlight. And so that's kind of the style that I try to do. Obviously, I don't sound like them, but I don't know. I could be arrogant and just be like, yeah, if Extol just needed a screamer, I could do it, because I have a very similar sort of black metal sort of thing. But it's easier for me to do those kind of the higher vocals now. And so that's kind of funny enough. I honestly think that that's the only reason we get labeled black and death metal a lot, is because most of the style that I do is not death metal vocals. It's mostly black metal, but there are obviously death metal vocal parts. But yeah, that's kind of how I got into it.
And it's funny with Paul Kerr, I think it was his name, from November Doom.
Yeah.
he like his low growls, I think, are probably the lowest I'm probably sure I've ever heard. But I love November's Doom's music, mainly, and especially with their types of guitar chord choices. Daniel's like, "Oh, David, check this out. Stack fifth chord right around here." I'm like, "Oh, sweet. Sounds good to hear something like that or whatever." And then with what was the name? Simon Rosen, also known as Pilgrim from Crimson Moonlight. I've never heard any high pitched screams like that in my life. I'm like, wow, this guy is completely insane. But yeah. And even there are even some melodic death metal moments in Crimson Moonlight's Veil of Remembrance album on tracks 1 and 3. And it's like, it's weird because it's like they're a blackened death metal band at the core. And then there are some melodic death metal moments in their music as well. I'm like, oh, I can actually get behind this. And then you just go like, get back into the black metal moments of the drums and the guitars. It's so insane. So yeah.
Yeah, people don't understand like highs. People who can naturally start death metal or deathcore singing with like a high scream don't understand like that's a unicorn. Because your vocal register naturally sits in the lower end. So to do the baritone or tenor, most men are going to be in that range to hit the high. Like not, what's his name? Eric Plant, right? From Led Zeppelin?
Robert Plant.
Sorry, Eric Robert. Kind of. I'm tired, folks. Calm down. If you hate me so much, definitely don't share the podcast. His high is just so unique.
Yeah.
Like that angelic choir boy high. Oh, what's the band? People say he sounds like
Greta Van Fleet.
Greta Van Fleet, right? But I actually get a lot more like I shouldn't even brought that up because now I can't even say I could tell there's Led Zeppelin influences, but he doesn't sound like Led Zeppelin.
It's sort of almost like a borderline Rush, Geddy Lee influence a little bit.
Yeah,
from what I remember.
It's almost like if all the 70s bands became one person. That's what it sounds like to me. And Greta Van Fleet's awesome. I haven't listened to him in a while though, because I literally listen to deathcore every day. and deathcore and Pomodoro lo-fi music for study. And I've gotten into that binaural beats at 40 hertz for focus music, for my deep focus studies. So it's definitely interesting how people can do stuff and do the snarls. I know in deathcore, it's kind of been this like, who can outdo the next like most demonic sounding sound? And it's just getting so ridiculous. I say that, but I'm also in a course with Will Ramos as a vocal instructor, and like I get to hear his goblins. Like I'm doing like Tuvan throat singing on Mondays. Wednesdays I'm doing like voice character acting, like working on like Elmo, Mickey Mouse, and Meat Wad. Really weird. Those just kind of like how you talk in those placements. I would love to do. I think Donald Duck would sound really cool with like a death. Like if you got that Donald Duck, but he's doing deathcore, I think would sound really cool. And to work that high register, like you have to like build up to it, and it's just such a pain. And like pig squills, like I can't figure that out because I'm not doing an inhale. I'm not doing an inhale. So trying to do exhale on that, it's just really weird. Which is weird. I can do the World War Z zombie squeal, but I can't do a pig squeal. I don't know. It's just weird. I think it's a mental block.
Pig squeals are hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, it's harder too because there's like two different ways you could do it. You can inhale it, or you could do the exhale, but they're both different. Because I can do them, but like, I find doing the exhales much easier. The inhale is a lot harder, even though the inhale is usually supposed to be the easier one.
Yeah.
But a lot of metal bands, and then you hear the videos. Oh, you're never supposed to inhale, blah blah blah. And tons of bands still do it. They may not do it exclusively, constantly.
Yeah.
That's all they do. Like Archspire does that, where every once in a while, when he does some of his squeals or some of his high register, he'll inhale, but everything else is exhale. So it's interesting how people do it. There's only one band that I know of that exclusively does inhales, and I don't think I've heard any other band. It's a metalcore band called Resist the Thought from Australia. I don't know how that guy gets his voice to sound that good inhaling, but if you should check it out. It's pretty heavy, really, really good. But that guy does exclusively inhales, and I don't know how he is able to do some of the things that he does. He apparently has his own method, and it makes for a good listen because it's really different. There are parts where his screams will last like 20 seconds, and he'll go from like a low to a high, and then go back from the high to the low, and then go back again like for a 30-second part. And I'm just like, how the heck does this guy do this? Because he's inhaling, because he can take in more breath. So
and
it's just
cheating. He's cheating.
Some people think it's cheating. Right? It's the same thing when you have triggers for the drum set and all that. Yeah, it's cheating.
People will always make those accusations. They always will make those accusations.
Yeah. It's kind of like when jazz players learn to circle breathe. I've been trying to do that with vocals, but it's so hard because your esophagus closes the trachea. And so you're trying to get sound out, but your body's like, no, stop that. So
yeah, I think my dad can do that because he plays trumpet. So it's easier to do it when you're playing an instrument that requires your breath. You kind of have to know how to circular breathe.
Well, Dad's also a singer, so he can play trumpet, flugelhorn, and he also sings. He's really good at both, honestly. He really is.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that lady in New Orleans that's pretty famous for playing jazz music that just can.
Oh, the clarinet.
Yeah, she just goes so hard on there.
She's unbelievably talented. It's pretty cool. Yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about.
She's such a good soul too, because she's always helping people out and but yeah, there's just so many talented people. You talked about switching bands. That's something I've noticed that happens in deathcore. I listened to the last 10 seconds of Life, and I was like, that's not Hate Church's vocals. That's someone different. And then I was like, I had to stop and go and look it up. Yeah, sure enough, he's in his own band. He's in a completely different band. And then the sad part was I realized his new band was literally touring in Tokyo the day that I discovered.
Of course.
He was there. I was like,
Of course.
That's only $130 plane ticket to go there. Take my wife to go see this. It'd be awesome. But it's just like, what was it? And about 4 years ago, there was to this day, it's still on Instagram, and I still get likes from it. And it was like, I didn't know there was a NBA first round pick draft swap with all the bands. And it's just like they just swap. You just have that issue. And there's also a lot of drama right now in the music scene. I think the big one right now is Immortal Disfigurement. Was having issues with an individual, CJ McCreary. Get into that. And then there's also the Hard Look fallout. I don't think I want to talk into that quite yet, but something that deathcore does a lot. Drama and swapping singers around.
Yeah.
So you don't see Taylor Swift being replaced. I'm just saying.
It's just funny because as far as Daniel and I, from our own personal experiences are concerned, and especially with when we see bands changing vocalists, just like right off the drop of a hat, it's just like, it's kind of true because most of the musicians generally will stay in the band, but the vocalist will either quit or will be let go by the band for whatever reason. And we've had that experience before, but we've also seen like bands in our genre actually just change vocalists, especially with the Human Abstract, for example. Nathan L's fantastic vocalist for that band, but then he ended up getting replaced by Travis Richter from from first to last. And it's kind of funny because you have a different vocalist in that, but you have pretty much almost the same musicians, aside from the vocalist in that band. So it's kind of funny because I know that from when we listen to certain bands or whatever, whatever we do, we notice that, oh man, they're getting different vocalists, like Haste the Days. Haste the Days, Stephen Keach is replacing, and then replacing their, I believe his name is Jesse or something. I'm not really sure. But anyway, all right, I'm losing it because I haven't listened to Haste the Day in a while. But yes, a lot of bands will switch vocalists. Yeah,
or you get like, I'd say the in other genres though, it's weird. You'll keep the vocalist, like let's say, what is Metallica considered? Power rock?
No, thrash metal.
Thrash metal.
I would say around that line, yeah.
They can't. They went through drummers.
Oh yeah, well,
yeah, and we got Megadeth because of it, and it's just interesting how there's just certain things. But yeah, I don't know if you guys.
They went through guitarists. They went through more so guitarists.
Yeah.
Lars, I think, was the only drummer in Metallica. As far as I know.
No, you're right, because I think his son was showing drums.
Yeah,
Lars is ridiculous.
Yeah,
ridiculous player.
Although I think Metallica went through bassists mainly because of Cliff Burton's accident. It wasn't much so his accident. It was just due to unfortunate circumstances that honestly should never have happened. And so then as a result, you end up having to go through different processes to get another bassist. And I mean, now they have Robert Trujillo, but as far as the guitarists, I think they went through not a lot, maybe a few guitarists too many at a certain sense until they got their current guitarist. I'm just trying to remember his name too, and I'm blanking out, and I just read about him just the very previous day or whatever, But yeah. Metal and then Megadeth. That's how they kind of spawned because of a disagreement between Dave Mustaine and Metallica's vocalist, rhythm guitarist James Hetfield. But yeah,
I was being a clown this morning, and I'm wearing a Mangled Carpenter shirt. Now that you can see it,
our record labels.
I put a Taylor Swift Super Bowl playlist on, and the song 15 came up, and I was like, make a funny video, just wear this like heavy metal shirt. and Seth and what's his name? Not Chris. They responded to it. I'm sorry. I've only interacted with Seth. I don't know who the other
Christopher Olsen, I believe.
Yeah, Chris. Yeah. I got a little heart notification of your latest post, which is funny.
Yeah.
My Instagram doesn't do well, which is weird because it used to be my biggest platform, but now it's TikTok somehow.
Oh, goodness gracious.
I just can go on TikTok and say something sassy, and people come in the comments, and then I'm like, thank you. You just won the algorithm.
The algorithm award.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm like, why even TikTok? I mean, if I had okay, here's the thing. I'm probably going to say another controversial thing. It's not even controversial. Here's my thing on TikTok. It's a Chinese entity that is just meant to make us be lazy. If I had the opportunity to do anything with TikTok and anything in existence, I would take the the 2019 coronavirus as a whole, digitize it, and infect ByteDance. their whole thing, and they get to deal with that, whatever it is. If I wanted to do anything at all in existence, but I don't know. The pandemic really just jammed everything up. Anyway.
They're pretty unscrupulous, and they're doing some terrible things. But for music right now, there's actually a very large community on TikTok, and if you've heard of the band Bro Job, I I am being mentored by their newest singer,
Okay.
Screamy Mimi, who started posting like literally 15, 20-second clips
Yeah.
of covering random metal songs to doing like Rick Astley's role, metal take of it and doing memes and stuff. And Bro Job had to let go their vocalist, surprisingly. and and so he's doing that. And it all came because he was posting on TikTok and seeing a lot of these bands. I have another Marty and sorry, I always forget the other guy's name. I'm sorry, buddy. I always watch Marty's stuff, but he's helping with the band. Marty's helping with Misconceptions. They just did a thing together. A Christian
Marty Friedman?
Marty Marion.
Marion?
Okay. And he has a band called Mara Jade, and they blew up and got to 33 spot on Apple Metal all through TikTok. So yes, it is pretty terrible company, and they do terrible things. And like I can't get I've been on TikTok for a long time. I can't get verified as an artist because I have to share the ISRC code with my artist name, the song, and the thing. But the way I distribute my music is somebody else uploads it, and they don't like that. And so I just can't get verified. So it's really stupid. And their support is like not there.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Tech support for TikTok.
It must be a great job. So if you ever see an opening for TikTok tech support, sign up because you don't do anything because they don't respond to anything you say.
You just chill.
Just chill.
That's a cush job there, man.
Chronically online.
It's like that chick at Twitter that's like, her job was literally marketing, but it's like, I wake up every day, I get my coffee, I go to the workout, I change and do this. And it's
Rachel Curavilla character. Yeah. And it's just funny. It's just like it's almost every chick in who works at Twitter or whatever. It almost seems like that.
Any of those Silicon Valley companies, they just, now we're going to go down the slide and then we're going to go to a caramel macchiato. And I'm just like, okay, with your 4-year degree that you got in communications and somehow you landed this job because your dad somehow knew someone from the company. You're definitely not a trust fund kid for sure.
Yeah. I think I don't like Elon. I like Elon Musk, but not like Elon Musk, if you know what I mean. I think he's kind of terrible. He kind of spawned the electric vehicle movement. It's terrible for the environment. People are dumb enough to believe him. Did he do some really cool innovation stuff? Yeah, he kind of pushed it and he put a face to it, but there's a lot of other more important engineers that were really helping out that pushed it. Yeah. It's funny because he did make a comment on like making sure that she got fired. Like we don't need her anymore. Yep. But Elon also does crap like, oh, if you're a worker at a Tesla factory, prepare to sleep on the assembly line because you'll be working 24/7. Yeah. Terrible person.
Who was this that he mentioned? Who did he mention about firing? Who was her name?
The chick. I can't remember her name. I could be mixing stuff up. I am pretty tired right now, but yeah. It's
the chick that made that TikTok video.
Yeah. Like, get her out.
David.
She's done.
Is that the one?
Yeah. Yeah. She can go do her yoga massage before work elsewhere, not here. It's just kind of interesting. It's really sad the way America's become. Dude. It's like we've been sold out for the corp. I really want to make a song about that. Maybe we can get together and make a song about, selling ourselves for profit. And it's just like, it's just terrible.
Yeah. I just find that hilarious that, this girl who posted the day in the life of a Twitter employee video is just like, she ended up like putting her social media accounts on private, or her Twitter account got deleted.
It's sad.
Well, I mean, not for me.
Yeah. It's just a strange world we live in. Like, we have like the Nestle CEO who doesn't believe that drinking water, like having access to fresh water, is a human right. Like he wants to sell it to you. The HP CEO, the Hewlett Packard CEO, said he doesn't want customers to ever own a printer again. He wants them subscription based. And that's why you have these companies going up and buying houses, because houses are the fastest way to make equity. Not to tangent down this way, but that's why they're going through all these places and buying all the property and selling them off to other places. That's why Canada is a mess right now, because the dummies let the Chinese go in there and buy up property. So houses that normally went from $150,000 are suddenly $750,000. A normal Canadian can never leave that. And then Canada is also confused why why are y'all wanting to move down to America? It's a mess right now. Yeah, because we can actually try to buy a house maybe in America. Here, it's like impossible.
Yeah.
So
going back down to music, like it's funny that you mentioned the CEOs thing, because there's a lot of truth in that. And I see streaming kind of doing that a lot, where I think now we've had streaming long enough for, I think, a lot of people to sort of wake up to the idea that, like, you realize you don't own any of the stuff you listen to, right? Like, if the internet suddenly, the grid just went offline tomorrow because of some you would not have access to the internet. You would have no access to the music that you listen to on streaming through Spotify or whatever. Every single day that you do that, you'd have no access to it. Same thing with shows. I think I heard about Ubisoft, that the video game company was saying, yeah, we want all of our games to be subscription models now. We don't want people to actually own our games anymore. And I'm like, that sounds evil. Like, this, like, no offense, I'm not that boomer that's crying communism, and that sounds like you're trying to create a socialist utopia. But that sounds like you're trying to create a socialist utopia, I don't know, I think it was the UN who was saying that, like, we don't want people to own property, and we don't want people.
Always the UN. It's always the UN.
Yeah, the UN's garbage. But I was just like, it's just interesting. And now I have a feeling within the next 10 years, we're going to see a resurgence back in DVDs. As wild as that is a claim to think, I mean, we're seeing people buying vinyl, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's vinyl's still pretty popular. Love vinyl. And I wouldn't be shocked if CDs come back, because people actually want to own the things that they want. They want to own their music. They want to own the music that they have. Right? Like, I know Napster was obviously a bad thing in some sense, but there was a lot of good that came from it. And the idea is that if you're not going to offer the service, streaming is really going to increase piracy, like 1,000%. If you don't offer the product, they will literally just get it offline from Pirate Bay or wherever they go, through Tor or whatever, right? Like, they'll do whatever they got to do to get the stuff that they want. You can't allow them to access it legally. They will download it and then have it for themselves. So I don't know. I think when it comes to music too, and Spotify and all those places, they don't really give the artist much money, if any money at all. I think Spotify is actually the smallest.
I just talked to Resurrected Dead. We had a 2-part podcast episode, and I brought this up, and they did do some changes. Like, people were gaming the system using white noise, using 30-second sound clips that were edited to where you would play a playlist to, like, sleep to whale noises, and you had no idea there was 200 songs that you just listened to, and you just made them a ton of money. And it's like, whereas, like, you and I were trying to get streams listening, and it's like we barely meet the threshold. So some of the stuff that they have done seems really terrible, but in some of the aspect, I think they're actually trying to give you unique listeners. Yeah. And I think one of the things they did do is bots. People who were blowing up on TikTok were getting people to go and buy bots to go stream these songs at, bot farms where it's some dude in a room full of iPhones just or whatever going around and, like, hitting play on all these songs to give unique listens. But they're really not unique listens. They're not real people. And so it's like, then you have people who are genuinely bleeding and sweating for their music, and it's like, oh, sorry, you didn't make it. Better next year.
Yeah, it's just wild to think. And not only that, but they can change things too, like the songs. Like, they'll literally, oh, you can't listen to the song because we don't think that it's appropriate. And I'm just like,
Infant Annihilator. That happened on people. I don't even know how it happened. Non-metalheads found out a band called Infant Annihilator, and if you can't understand about it, the songs are about women and abortion, basically from like an anti-Catholic stance. Anyway, terrible songs, really gruesome. But people found out about it and got them pulled from Apple Music in a cancel movement. And it's like, what you can't pull is going into house and pulling someone's CDs. We'll probably get there at some point, but hopefully not.
That's terrifying to think about. But like I said, that's what streaming's doing. I mean, shows. There's a SpongeBob episode you can't watch because it's deemed inappropriate.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I'll be real, it's pretty inappropriate. But like, I was a kid when I saw it, and I'm fine, right? It was, and it's just wild to think because the streaming companies have the rights and they can do whatever they want with their intellectual property. But it's like, if you bought the DVD, you don't have to worry about that. You can watch it in the exact. Community had an episode where I think it was Ken Jeong. He was wearing blackface, but and on Peacock or no, on Netflix they pulled that episode. I watched it illegally because there was the only way to watch it at the time, other than buy the DVD. But I didn't know where the DVD. I didn't know if I could actually buy it. I didn't want to pay $40 for the whole series or whatever. But the idea was that he was wearing blackface because his character, they were doing Dungeons and Dragons, right? And so he was a dark elf. Like, that was the reason why. But you guys don't care about context. Anything that you hear of that is blackface immediately. If it's not black, if it's a white person or anyone that's not black, immediately we're going to pull it. And it's just like, again, they don't care about the context anymore. And so it's kind of scary that they can do that now. And so what you were mentioning, I mean, who knows? They're doing it down the road. They could literally go into your house and just take property.
UK, Canada, and Australia right now. Those are tyrant. They're what do they call them? Nanny states. Oh, we saw you posting some stuff on Facebook. Did you really mean to call the mayor the C word? Yeah, I said that. Well, congrats. You're going to jail. And it's like, also, oh, look, there's been a mass stabbing. Oh, we need to take away the knives. Please turn in your illegal knives. It's like, idiots.
Yeah, Canada, please turn in your handguns. I'm like, okay, that's a terrible idea, but sure. I'm definitely sure most of your citizens are going to voluntarily turn them over and for no gain at all. Yes, that definitely sounds like a Trudeau idea if I've ever heard one.
Yeah, but that's
so like I said, if they're doing it for guns, I can't imagine what they're going to do for media in the next 10 years. I have a feeling, like I said, weirdly enough, I have a feel that CDs or DVDs or Blu-rays or any of that stuff is going to make a comeback only because of the fact that people actually want to own the media that they want to buy. So
it's a good point too, because if you own it, you have it, and nobody can really, in a sense, from like an electronic cyberspace sense, nobody can take that from you. Especially for me, my brother and I, we both have master's degrees, and the funny thing is, that's a big thing. If anyone here's the thing: if there is anything that anyone is ever going to be able to take away from us, our education, they cannot take it away, because those were journeys that Daniel and I went through, and those are just pure experience, and that's literally what that was. And the only way you could probably take it away technically would be, if we got our minds wiped or whatever. But at the same token, you can't really take it away. It's impossible.
You do have movements of schools pulling people's degrees and changing them. I know, for instance, my school had some stuff going on. I want to get into that subject because I haven't put the disclaimer up in a while. But my opinions do not represent anybody that I may associate or potentially associate in the future. And my standing disclaimer is my thoughts and ideas are representative of my current time and not future, past, or present. Right. There we go. Stupid disclaimer out of the way. I need to start putting it at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because I had a blog and somebody was saying you shouldn't be saying some of the stuff you said on the blog. And I was like, I think you're being really stupid. That's what I think you're doing. Mm-hmm. Anyway, but yeah, it's been kind of crazy with all the stuff that's going on. It's kind of worrisome. But yeah, Bandcamp, I believe through the last statistics I looked up, they give back the most to artists. So I try to pick up as many people's stuff. Sadly, I forgot about you guys because I didn't see you on the Broken Curfew store. And then I got hard look. They were still showing on the store because of the whole stuff. And so they got refunded. And so I had to reach out to Chris and get some of his merchandise. And I ordered a Resurrected Divinity shirt and I still haven't gotten it. I need to figure out what happened with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking on the when you say the store, are you talking about the Bandcamp store?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Let me click.
I can't. It's weird.
So,
if you look on Bandcamp, like on your phone, and then Bandcamp on the desktop, two different experiences.
Yeah, two different experiences for sure. And I agree. Like, because right now, like we have shirts through. So if you go to the Broken Curfew Records,
yeah, you got Anchor,
page,
right?
You can get our compact disc of Eternal Conscious Punishment.
Oh yeah,
but
you're the first track because it loads in order.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so if you can get the CD from there, but to actually get the merch, you would have to go to Anchor Merchandising. So it's interesting that for some reason we don't have it on the Broken Curfew Records Bandcamp, but I'm sure it's just because of a logistical thing. So I'm not really worried or concerned about that. But you do have to go to two different places in order to get either our CD or the merch. So bless you.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Also, anybody out there listening, if you decide to start a band and you have Bandcamp, please pay attention when it says make a artist profile. Don't connect it. I didn't pay attention. I didn't read that. I was like, click, 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 click. Terrible choice.
Yeah.
That's all. Oh, that's why. Yeah, because on my desktop is my artist profile, and on my mobile is there. So I'll figure it out. I'll pick some of your stuff up. I love it. Chris did sign my CD. It was pretty cool, and I think he threw in some extra swag. So
sweet.
But yeah, that's just really sad with what happened there. But it sounds like it's interesting. And then I had some of the fallback coming to my page. Just because, and I was like, look, I'm going to I did debate in high school. I would have gone to nationals if I didn't say something stupid. After high school, as a high school graduate, I did judging for school and did that. I really love doing the type of debate. I would host and moderate debate. And it's the second you say that, these individuals suddenly don't want to talk about their opinions. Because oh no, I don't have time to do that. But you have time to go and harass and try to destroy someone's livelihood. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Real Christian of you. Yeah. But each their own. It's different. We have a different world we live in today. But that's something that I just kind of wish, like, there's so many different denominations of Christianity. And on top of that, there's new versions of it being made every day. We just need to learn to get along. And so a lot of my podcast has been focused on just kind of talking to different people and doing that. So who's a Christian, who's not a Christian is just kind of stupid because we're getting to the point where you can't even, I bet we'll come to a point where we can't even argue about that anymore. You won't be able to talk about religion because it'd be so it upset somebody. So
yeah.
I think we need to put aside our differences and focus on Christ as Jesus, Jesus Christ as the Lord. And that's what we should be focusing on.
Yeah. I agree.
Especially it's true if, when, like, say I have friends who are Catholics, I don't go around talking, about, Catholicism or whatever in a negative light whenever I'm around them. I mean, it's because in that point, even when Paul mentioned this in the Bible, like, it's of no use. It really isn't. That's their business at that point. But when you're talking to other people about certain ideas, especially if that person may be atheistic or agnostic, then generally there's really going to be no problem at all. But at the same token, I think there was a verse that Logan, I think you mentioned that. I think that actually illustrates your point. where, I mean, I don't know, I know the verse is there. I'm trying to make sure um, I'm trying to make it like, cohesive if possible, trying to, because there's like there's a verse that mentions that, when you can try to get along with others and, especially in a circumstance where, if it's a sensitive topic or whatever, like, make it like, do this for the Lord's sake, but there'll be times where we may not want to do that. And, sometimes, that's okay. It happens, but yeah, it's interesting because we have other folks, other friends of ours who go through life in the same way we do, but within totally different circumstances. And it's all about, relating to them as well, and trying to be with them through that point, through that point forward too. So,
and I point this out, and some people have agreed with my reasoning. Muslims have a certain stigma attached to them. And in Europe, they're forcing Muslims to do stuff that's very, forcing a store owner to sell stuff that would be halal or sinful. So pork and alcohol, they're not going to be selling that, or forcing them to come together or take the hijab off. If they're doing that to the Muslims, how easy do you think they're going to roll over these Christians who can't even get together and just recognize, people believe in Jesus Christ are Christians? Not if they accept the Trinity or non-Trinitarian, or if they go to this church or not this church. It's we're so focused on some of these nonsense stuff that we're missing kind of these big markers that one of the largest religious groups in the world is continually being persecuted by the world. I think that should wake up a few little signals, kind of like, maybe I should start paying attention to my local politics and what's going on. And like, why is feeding the homeless? Like, how is that a thing? Like, you see so many videos of people being arrested for feeding the homeless. Like, how did we get here?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's really sad. And I pray for America to wake up, but I don't think we will.
Yeah, especially when it almost comes to a point where it's like too late. I pray for the state of California, my brother and I, our home state, where we were born and raised. I would pray for California to wake up in that same vein, but they've already reached a point where it's kind of too late, and it will be too late for them unless they really relent and repent, and then the people of the state decide to wake up and say, okay, we've had enough of this. This is clearly not working, even if a lot of the facades that the state government there are putting up seem like they have everything under control, even though they don't.
Yeah.
It's really, really sad. And I still remember some of those places, especially for me. I'm definitely more of like a foodie. So there are places that I really wish I could take with me into Texas, but I can't, So it's a sad part. But if I do go back, I can come back as a visitor. But unless the Lord calls me there, or if there is a regime change in California, I will not go back.
Wait, so are you two confessing that you have fled the state of California to Texas?
Well, I have. I can admit that for myself. Whatever Daniel says, that's his business. But I have left the state with my folks first. Begrudgingly. I didn't want to go, but circumstances dictated I had to go. And plus, I'm sure I was not, especially with the pandemic the way it was, especially in California, and a lot of the people, especially in the state, that were just really negative about the whole thing, and they were just like, they became increasingly germophobic, and I'm just like, what's like I was in my mind, I'm just thinking like, bro or lady, what's your deal? Whatever it was. And it could just be me being in a bubble, but at the same token, I'm just like, people just got really, really, really paranoid for absolutely no real reason or rational reason. I mean, other than the fact that we did have a pandemic, I understand, But at the same token, I'm like, people are gonna, people are gonna move on. We're gonna move from this pandemic. This is not the worst thing that has happened. There are probably gonna be plenty of other worse things, and people are gonna market it. The media is gonna market it as like, hey, this is the worst thing that's happening. The end is near, and I'm like, I'm still here. I'm not leaving anytime soon unless the Lord calleth me home. But and I get into certain disagreements with people who have like an issue with how I see things, and that's perfectly fine. But I also think that once it comes to certain people's individual livelihoods and rights, especially their right to not only just not wear a mask, but their right to refuse a coronavirus vaccination. I got vaccinated against my own free will. Because I'm an employee of the federal government, and I'm like, I really, as a result, I have a major problem with people telling me like that what to do at that point. And that's kind of the reason why I didn't want to join the military in the first place, or not didn't want to join. Because I haven't joined the military, but that was one of the reasons why I think my dad told me, like, yeah, David, I don't think you would probably work out in the military. And I'm like, why is that? And he's like, well, because you kind of do your own thing. And I'm like, well, generally he's right. I wouldn't work out in the military very well because I'm kind of in my own space. Obviously, no disrespect to the United States military. My father is a retired major in the Air Force. He's one of the nicest guys, and not only that, he's definitely one of the best examples of what a father really should be. And I've met a lot of other veterans as well, and I really honestly have no issues with the military. And not to mention, a lot of the military veterans are just like definitely one of the best individuals I've ever met in my entire life. And there's just nothing but nice and great things to say about these folks. So, but it's interesting, for me, I value a little bit more of my own individual liberties than maybe a lot of the other media do, especially with some false teachers in the Christian circle, like this pastor up in Washington State saying that, oh, because of certain passages in the Bible, what does it mean to be religiously exempt from vaccination? And he says, oh, my religious exemptions should mean that I should get vaccinated to safeguard the well-being of my brother and the well-being of my sister in Christ. I'm like, oh, come on. He's not only a hypocrite, that dude, but a heretic at that point. Ugh. And yeah, I just have a personal problem with, being forcibly vaccinated against my own will of something I never really needed to be vaccinated against in the first place. I wouldn't treat a vaccinated person any differently than a non-vaccinated person, and it really became like a medical form of discrimination, a digital and medical form of discrimination that really should never have happened in the first place. And that's always been my stance. And I don't treat people, with any malice, regardless of whether or not they were vaccinated against coronavirus 2019. I honestly couldn't care less about that stuff. So, yeah, it's just
weird times. They're already talking about it in university too.
Yeah.
I was like, interesting. But wrapping up here soon, what can we expect from Every Thought Captive in 2024 or 2025? I don't want to put the pressure. I've been working on my EP since 2021. I'm just saying.
Hey, you know what? Everyone has a timetable, and it's perfectly fine.
Mine is slide it to the right.
Same with me. I actually need to work on my own stuff on the side at some point, and I know that life will get busy and stuff like that. But I hope to release my own stuff as well on the side as well. However, with Every Thought Captive, Daniel and I are already, it's funny. He and I had a conversation about our release of Eternal Conscious Punishment. And I asked him, like, hey, dude, this is great. This is great stuff. What do you think? And he's like, oh, I've already, my brother was like, oh, all right. I already moved on. I'm like, wait, what are you talking about? And he's like, remember, we're working on new music. And I'm like, oh, that's right. So we're working on new music. He and I in the moment. We actually, I think we got a little bit more than halfway done with all the instruments. Drums are finished for a little bit more than half the songs. We're going to be getting to a point where we're sometime soon we'll be meeting back up, and then we'll finish the rest of the material at his place up in upstate Texas, and then from that point, once everything's done, it'll be entering the mixing and mastering stages, and we'll just release it. We'll let Seth know at a certain point, but we're making progress to that. Daniel, anything you want to add?
Yeah, we have. Trying to think, we have about half the album, like the musical bones of it, done. So we, the drums for the most part are done for like 4 songs already. So we have 4 demos already, just 4 songs demoed in that process. So obviously there's no vocals or lyrics written yet, because I tend to write lyrics after the songs are written and done. So that way I kind of write my cadences and all that to the songs once they're done. I don't like doing it the other way. It's just too ridiculous. I like fitting the lyrics and the vocals to the song rather than having all the music have to fit the words. I'm not a huge fan of that.
I agree.
So yeah, it's just my work. That's my workflow. And so how all the writing is usually it will be David and I will come up with guitar riffs, and then I'll come up with drum parts, and then we build everything off from those 2 things. So if we need to add bass, we'll add it. If we need to add keyboard stuff, I'll add that. Yeah, I don't know what 2024 will have as much as our music will come. If I had to guess, I would say the full length album would come out next year. It would be amazing if it came out at the end of the year. I have no idea. I'm not going to say that that's going to be the case, but I can't say that that's going to happen either. Just knowing that our workflow is kind of slow because we only work on stuff when one of us comes up to see the other, and it's a 4-hour distance between us. So, weekends and stuff like that, it doesn't happen every weekend, obviously. So we make the time for it. But we got a lot of work done. I was telling my brother, like, to do Eternal Conscious, like I said, we did the first EP in a week. In 2022, it literally was like a week, and we had the whole EP done. Maybe not the vocal lyrics, but all the music was done. Yeah, sorry, 2021. And then for Eternal Conscious Punishment, there was a lot of, where I used to live, it wasn't the greatest place. It was a really small space. So having to write the music was a lot more difficult. So this EP really was like pulling teeth compared to the first one. And even with these new 4 songs that we have, it was light years easier to do it. I felt like Eternal Conscious Punishment was definitely the hardest thing that we had to sit and write. I think the bridge section in the last song, we didn't have that done until the end, like the middle section of last year. So because we were just struggling to come up with the section there. So it was a hard, arduous process to do this EP that just came out. But I'm glad that everyone's enjoying it. Because for me, intellectually, I've moved on. I'm like, I just want to get the album done. Like, this is what I'm really focused on right now. So if I had to say, I would say like the early 2025 or mid 2025 is when the album will be out. But I'm excited because I'm happy to move on to an actual album now as opposed to doing an EP. Like, I always thought that the albums were impossible for us just based upon our location and all that. But it's nice that I'm like, holy crap, within about a week's time, we got 4 songs done. And, none of the songs are like 3 minutes. Like, we're talking 5 to 8 minute songs. So it's clearly a lot of music and time and things like that going into it. So I think we're going to do 3 more. So we're not going to have like a full 10 songs, but we'll have 7. But again, I think the longest song we have is like 8.5 minutes. So definitely longer than anything we've ever put out. So I'm really excited for it. It's definitely us, but it'll definitely, I think people will really like it. If you really like Eternal Conscious Punishment and the first EP, I definitely think it's a good marriage between the 2. but I'm happy that we're going to be doing an album finally. I think it's time. So I'm having my first child in April. So obviously that's going to impact, the amount of time that we can put into this. So it'll be a life change for me for sure. But I fully intend on continuing to work on this album. So I will say at the absolute latest, it'll probably be out next summer. 2025.
I'm excited. And if you ever need to have a sample of a child screaming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have free access, right? So I'm excited, but it'll be hard because it's going to take a lot of time away from other things that I enjoy and passions and stuff. But that's the point, I would imagine. So we'll see what happens. But I'm excited for the EP to finally be out and for people to listen to it. So I'm kind of curious, in the next coming months, what songs or what song from the EP is the one that really everyone likes. Because for the first album or first EP, it was Spellbound. So I'm really interested to see, I think on Apple Music, the most popular song is Repent or Perish. But Eternal is the one that's getting the most traction. But I know Broken Curfew is really trying to push Punishment. So that's fine. And so we'll see what happens with that. But My Brother and I, that's our favorite song on the EP, is the last song. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm interested to see how people enjoy the EP and stuff. And I'm just pumped already for the next round of music that we're going to get. I think everyone will really enjoy it because it'll be a really good eclectic mix of black metal, death metal, progressive metal, and then maybe a little bit of avant-garde sort of stuff. But I'm really excited for it. I've religiously listened to the songs and stuff, the demos in my car, just to kind of try to find cadences and man, I know exactly what I'm going to do here. So I'm really excited. I'm going off way on a tangent, but I'm very, very excited for what's to come for us.
It's time for you to have your share. David did most of the episode, so you got to get your tangent.
No, it's fine.
Well,
all good.
It was funny when Daniel mentioned that the bridge on Punishment, I believe, was the only thing that's left to go off of that last EP. And then I was trying to come up with something, and I'm just lying on his futon, just back up against the futon, just resting, with the guitar on my lap, just trying to come up with something. And then I came up with something really cool. And then Daniel was like, "Oh, that's something that Gorgoroth would do." And I'm like, I've never listened to Gorgoroth in my entire life.
Gorguts.
Gorguts. Whoa, it wasn't Gorgoroth. It was Gorguts. Okay, I got confused. And I'm like, yeah, I've never listened to Gorguts, but it was something that Gorguts would do. And it was like, okay, that's cool. I dig it.
Hey, just do the Claudio Sanchez of Coheed and Cambria method. Eat some cereal on your kitchen floor, and it'll come to you.
That sounds like something they would do.
That's how he wrote. That's how Welcome Home was written. He was just just one Saturday morning.
I'm not surprised.
guys, get over here.
Brennan, our friend Brennan has actually made fun of Coheed and Cambria. I think mainly due to Claudio's voice. But it's just, not to talk bad about Coheed and Cambria. It was just like a funny observation. And Brennan's just one of those guys, one of our friends, who's just very, he's very not abrasive as a person, but he's very observational in the sense of things that sound very funny to him. It's just hilarious.
Yeah, different voice, but it's amazing. You can't replace him. You can't replace him.
Because he has a signature tone.
Yeah. You can't replace him or Taylor Swift.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but that's really cool. And we can pick up your merch on Bandcamp and then click links. It is there. You're on Apple as well. And Spotify. Got you on the playlist. I double checked.
And then to get any of the actual merch, you go to Anchor Merchandise. And then to get the EP, the actual physical copy of it, you can go to the Broken Curfew Bandcamp page. They'll have that there. So they're separate, but I promise we do actually have physical, actual shirts and stickers and all that stuff. I can vouch for the sticker for our logo. I have it on the back of my car. I've had it for over a year already, and it's super high quality.
Just holding up in Texas.
Hold it up.
It's really good.
Yeah, and it's raining, and it's rained so many times here, and there was an ice storm. That sticker is mint. You can get that from Anchor Merchandise. You can just type our name, and it should come right up.
And for people listening, bands need merchant. That's where they make money. I don't know if people understand this, but music is very, very, very expensive. Like if I had $1 million right now, gone, easy.
Yep.
What did it go to? I don't know. Couple plugins, music recording.
Not even a couple plugins, but a whole studio.
Studio.
I had like, we kind of have. I mean, we have a recording studio, obviously in different places. One here in San Antonio, one up in Irving, where Daniel is. And it's funny because we started this studio off of an idea that Dad had he had an idea like, hey, David's getting his master's in audio. We can actually make a studio as a subsidiary to my company or whatever. And so we have pretty expensive equipment, obviously, and like 50 grand was like, thrown into like actual studio equipment and all that stuff.
It's like that scene from South Park. Here's your first $100 and it's gone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most of it obviously was for a business purpose, and it was business expense. So that actually helps.
Oh yeah.
And so we're making the best of it we're making do with what we have, and we're so thankful for this opportunity. I'm thankful for being able to do things within my trade that I really have a lot of pleasure in doing, and even working on our latest record so far. I mean, it's not obviously released yet, but working on our first full length at the moment with Daniel has been one of the most awesome times I've ever had in my life. Mainly because I get to be up there with my family. I get to be up there spending time with mom, dad, Daniel and his wife, but mainly being with Daniel and actually working on stuff with him to music, in the works and actually out of the ringer. And once everything's done, it's just gonna make the reward that much more fulfilling. And I just felt at home because now DFW felt like home to me because all my family's up there, and I'm the only one of my family in San Antonio. And I mean, as much as I love San Antonio, home for me is DFW area. But you never know with how time will what time will do, what the Lord will have you feel at certain points. I might end up growing to love San Antonio even more, and but you never know. So,
well, it's almost the witching hour, so I need to get into bed.
Yes, absolutely.
But this has been super fun. I appreciate it. I love Every Thought Captive. It is certified gym music. I hit a PR with it, so it was pretty cool. I enjoyed it. But yeah,
glad that we could contribute.
Excellent. Yeah. If you need a gym test your music, let me know.
Yeah.
Certified rack banging music, let me know. I got you. But yeah, this is really great. It's Amarals, you've been phenomenal. Love your music. We'll see what goes on. And you're on Facebook, Instagram, you're on all over. So if they can't find you, it's their fault, right?
Yeah, at this point, it's pretty easy. It'll be easy you could just again, a Google click away, you'll be able to find our material and all.
Oh no, I stepped in Every Thought is Captive again.
Yeah. Or you'll type it in, and if you just type in Every Thought Captive, you'll see a lot of Bible, which is fine because I'm actually like, well, hey, actually, if that's all they find, I'd rather they find that. But you just type in Every Thought Captive band, and we should come up immediately. So
yeah, on just any search engine, doesn't matter which one.
This has been great. All right, thanks, brothers. It's been good.
Thank you, Logan.
Christ is Lord.
Thank you.
Love y'all. Bye.
Appreciate it.